Pain has always been a language of power, and throughout history, rulers, courts, and inquisitions designed devices not just to punish the body, but to break the human mind. Historians who study torture rarely rank these devices by brutality alone, but by a combination of physical suffering, psychological terror, duration, and inevitability. Some caused immediate agony, while others were designed to stretch pain over hours, days, or even weeks, turning time itself into a weapon. What follows is a historically grounded ranking of the most painful torture devices based on how they were used, how long victims endured them, and why survivors, when they existed, described them as worse than death. At the lower end of the ranking, yet still horrifying by any modern standard, was the pillory and stocks commonly used in medieval Europe. Though often remembered as public humiliation devices, historians emphasize that the pain came from forced immobility. Victims were locked into wooden frames for hours or days, unable to shift their weight, exposed to cold, heat, dehydration, and attacks from crowds. The true suffering wasn't immediate injury, but the slow swelling of limbs, muscle cramping, joint damage, and psychological torment of being displayed as less than human. Many prisoners fainted repeatedly, waking only to more pain, shame, and exhaustion. More severe was the Spanish donkey, a triangular wooden beam on which victims were forced to straddle, often with weights tied to their legs. Gravity did the work, pulling the body downward against a sharp ridge. Historians note that the device was especially cruel because it offered no release. Every second increased pressure, cutting into muscle and bone without necessarily killing the victim. The pain intensified the longer the torture lasted, making even minutes feel endless. Victims often begged to confess simply to be taken down, even when they had nothing to confess to. Ranked higher by historians is the scold's bridle, a metal cage placed over the head, primarily used on women accused of gossip or disobedience. A metal plate or spike pressed against the tongue, making speech painful or impossible. While it caused limited physical injury, historians emphasize its psychological cruelty. Victims were paraded through towns, unable to speak, swallow, or defend themselves. The pain came from enforced silence, jaw strain, and the terror of public degradation. Many accounts describe victims collapsing from exhaustion and panic rather than injury. The thumbscrew represents a shift toward focused, targeted agony. This small device crushed fingers or toes between metal plates tightened by screws. Historians rank it as especially painful because of the density of nerves in the extremities. The pain escalated gradually, allowing interrogators to control the pace and prolong suffering. Unlike larger devices, the thumbscrew caused intense pain without immediately disabling the victim, making it ideal for repeated sessions. Survivors often describe the anticipation of tightening as worse than the pressure itself. Higher on the scale is the rack, one of the most infamous torture devices in European history. Victims were tied by wrists and ankles, then slowly stretched by turning rollers. Historians describe the pain as uniquely unbearable because it attacked the body's structure rather than surface tissue. Joints dislocated, muscles tore, and nerves stretched beyond their limits. What made the rack particularly cruel was the sound. Victims could hear their own joints separating, reinforcing the terror that their body was being permanently destroyed. Many survived initial sessions only to be returned repeatedly, each time with less resistance and more damage. Even more psychologically devastating was the iron chair, fitted with spikes or heated surfaces. Victims were strapped down, unable to shift their weight, forced to endure pain that increased over time. Historians emphasize that restraint amplified suffering. Pain normally triggers movement, but here movement was impossible. The longer the victim remained seated, the deeper the agony set in, turning endurance into the real punishment. Confessions often came not from peak pain, but from exhaustion and hopelessness. Among the most feared devices was the breaking wheel used for both torture and execution. Victims were tied to a wheel while executioners smashed limbs with heavy objects. While this often resulted in death, historians classify it as torture due to the prolonged nature of suffering. Victims sometimes remained alive for hours or days afterward, fully conscious, unable to move, waiting for death. The pain was catastrophic, but so was the mental terror of survival without hope of recovery. Ranked near the top by many historians is the strappado, a deceptively simple method. Victims' hands were tied behind their back and attached to a rope, then hoisted into the air and dropped. Suddenly, the shock dislocated shoulders and tore muscles instantly. What made the strappado especially painful was repetition. Victims were lifted and dropped again and again, each time compounding damage. Weights were often added to the feet to increase force. Survivors described an overwhelming sense of helplessness as their own body weight became the instrument of pain. Even more infamous is the brazen bull, an ancient Greek device often cited by historians for its symbolic cruelty. Victims were placed inside a hollow metal bull and heated from below. While historians debate how frequently it was used, its ranking comes from the combination of physical suffering and psychological horror. The enclosed space, darkness, and inability to escape amplified terror. The design transformed screams into sounds resembling an animal, stripping victims of human identity even in death. At the very top of most historical rankings is scaphism, an ancient Persian method widely considered the most painful torture ever recorded. Victims were trapped between two hollowed logs or boats, force-fed milk and honey, and left exposed. Pain came not from a single injury, but from prolonged suffering over days. Insects, exposure, dehydration, and infection combined to create continuous agony. Historians emphasize that scaphism's cruelty lay in its duration. Death was slow, inevitable, and accompanied by constant awareness. Victims remained alive long enough to fully experience their condition, making time itself the executioner. What unites all these devices is not just physical pain, but intentional design. Historians agree that torture was never about truth, it was about control. Devices were engineered to remove agency, erase dignity, and make survival feel worse than surrender. Pain was calculated, measured, and often theatrical, meant to send a message far beyond the victim. Today, these devices remain locked behind museum glass, but their legacy is a warning. They remind us how easily intelligence can be twisted into cruelty and how fear can justify unimaginable acts when power goes unchecked. History does not record these tools to glorify them, but to ensure that pain, once normalized, is never allowed to become policy again.